It's time for our next keynote speaker. With 10 plus years experience in strategy and business development from companies such as H&M and Spotify, as well as coding her first website at the age of 9, the relationship between strategic leadership and tech has now led her to found her own company in 2022. Here to talk about how to predict and navigate the crisis in uncertain times using data is the CEO and founder of Better Odds, Anna Loverus.
Thank you, Hannah. So nice to be here. So yes, I have the fun opportunity to talk to you guys about navigating the times we're in, the turbulent times, and how to use data to do this. My name is Anna Loverus. I have been working with a lot of companies, and a lot of the time I've been ending up in the crisis management team for different reasons. And after doing this a couple of times, I felt like maybe there's a better way to do this than just wait until the shit hits the fan and try to deal with things when they happen. Like, what data do we have? Do we have any data, and how can we use it? So I founded a company that kind of looks into how to predict business disruption. And I will share with you today 2 types of data that we use to do this prediction, and a kind of glimpse into the artificial intelligence models that we've built to do this prediction. And if we start with this, it feels like the world is getting more uncertain. But is it really, is that really the case? And if we look at the data we have, we can see this is one of the few ways to predict if uncertainty is increasing. Well, we can also live and feel like, you know, we now have two ongoing wars in the world and closer to us. But there's also an index by the World Bank that looks into how often we mention uncertainty in news media and other things. And you can see it has been increasing. So, oops, sorry, I was looking for the laser pointer. Throughout the years, the analysis of the world in the text that we use when we write our newspapers and our reports and other things, we do mention uncertainty a lot more. So I think this is kind of interesting. We have COVID here, huge uncertainty. Russia's war in Ukraine, not as big a bump. The US presidential election was more uncertain for the world than Russia's war in Ukraine. But I think so we predict this over time, and we try to understand how are we doing. But I also think the most concerning thing for me is this trend line, right? It's starting to get a little bit exponential. And this is not something that is looking to go away anytime soon. So when we had this as a background, and we started to look into, like, what is the issue? Like, it's uncomfortable to live in a world that is uncertain, but what is the cost? And as a company, it's pretty concerning, because it's no longer about being good at growing in your everyday kind of business as usual. It's about not going bankrupt when the crisis hits. So for the companies on the Forbes 2000 list, it costs them 3 to 5% of their EBITDA margin, even if it's a short disruption of just a 30-day crisis. And COVID was a 2-year crisis. The war in Russia is also a lot longer than just 30 days. And we also see that a lot of the companies today live shorter than companies did 50 years ago. So it is a lot more challenging to be a company today. And this is also a trend that is expected to continue. Like, most of us will outlive the big companies around us. And I don't think that's been the case. Like, they've merged and they've changed names, but they haven't really, like, fallen off the earth. But that's what's bound to happen a lot more. Okay. So there's a large number of things, like disruption drivers, things that might change what's, like things that a company might want to be aware of. Everything from how their things are going in logistics? Do they have the right supplies, the resources? There are climate change challenges for many companies. The geopolitical tension is impacting a lot of companies as well. So there are so many different things that you now need to be aware of. And most leaders ask themselves 3 questions. What is going on? What's the impact on our business? And what should we do about it? And I will talk to you about 2 of these kind of disruption drivers in detail. So that you can get a little bit of understanding what we do and what type of data we look at. So if we start with disinformation, many of you have probably heard about disinformation, but now you'll get a crash course. Where should I? No, I'm on the right button. It's just not really clear where I should point it. Oh, over there, okay. So, there's a number of different types of information threats that are getting increasingly common. And disinformation is one of them. So disinformation is when you share misleading or false information with the intention to create or fuel a certain belief among an audience. A lot of the time, there's a malign actor behind this. But it's also connected a lot to what we call deepfakes and fake news, AI-generated content of world leaders and others, to kind of fake that something happened that didn't really happen. It's also connected to conspiracy theories. You've probably heard of QAnon. And doxing and phishing. Doxing being when you release information online that shouldn't be public, so someone's address, to make it easier to harm or threat them in some way. So the kind of illegitimate leaking of private information. So we have a lot of kind of closely connection threats in the information space now. And the cost of disinformation, it exceeds the cost of terrorism and natural disasters combined. So it's a huge cost for society when we have this information. And it's also increasing quite a lot. So what could this look like for a company? Disney have been challenged quite a lot because QAnon, so quick intro. QAnon wants to recruit people to their conspiracy theory. One way to do that is to take the side of the children. So QAnon, a lot of the time, blames people for being pedophiles. At Disney World, the people in the costumes, like the Donald Duck and the Mickey Mouse, according to QAnon, they're all pedophiles. QAnon are also right-wing in a lot of their political opinions. Florida is Disney, being in right-wing Florida, is challenged by the right-wing politicians in Florida, but Disney is also very progressive. So QAnon is not a big fan of Disney. They have been using meme stock tactics, trying to kind of impact the Disney stock. They have a lot of disinformation. Oops, no, I did. This is not working great. Sorry. There we go. Here we go. Now we're back at Disney. Maybe I should start using the things on the computer. Disney have disinformation, where people just write things about them online. But people are also going to Disney World, bringing their weapons. So they have increasing security costs. Even if nothing happens, even if they find them, they have increasing security costs. But they're also a much larger risk that something happens at the Disney World with a shooting or similar, because of these conspiracy theories. If we look at something we all know pretty well, the conversations around NATO and Sweden joining NATO, this is a dashboard that we follow. And this is data from January 2023. So it's more than a year old. And already then, when we were in the conversations about joining NATO, we tracked the disinformation levels. And when we do that, we have 4 parameters that we look at. We look at the number of foreign influence. So are there countries like Russia, China, Iran that are actively pushing these narratives? So this is this column, foreign influence. How much of what's written in these themes that we are following, how much of that content is pushed by a foreign state? So you can see here, Sweden supports terrorism. 52% of what we categorize falling into that narrative online is pushed by an actor like Russia or Iran or Saudi Arabia or China. We look at believability. So how, compared to an average news text, is the content more or less believable than an average news article? So we index at 100. So the conversation around NATO bid will increase Russia's nuclear missiles in the Baltic is almost as believable as any general news article. We look at virality. So how viral compared to a normal news article are the content that is in these narratives. 100 is the base. So some of them, NATO is run by the global cabal, 118, so that's pretty viral, while some are not as viral. And why we do this is that if something is not believable at all, we're not super concerned about it being viral, because a meme can be super viral, but everyone knows it's a meme, it's not true. If something is super trustworthy, believable, but it's not viral at all, well, not that many people will see it, so it's going to be fine, or more or less. But if it's both believable and viral and pushed by a foreign actor, we're pretty concerned. So we aggregate this into a metric that we call potential for impact, and we look at how concerning we find these narratives. And this is NATO, and as you can see, there's a lot of foreign influence here, but we also do this for companies. And so then you might have your company name in here. Saab will win if NATO is, if we join NATO or something. So we also track this on a company level, where it's not at all unlikely that you have 30–40% foreign influence kind of surrounding your brand at any given time. So let's look at another example here. So we have IKEA. Maybe you remember that IKEA was, they reduced the price on the sausage about a year ago. So the meat sausage was slightly more expensive, and the vegetarian sausage, it was a little bit less expensive, because according to IKEA's sustainability strategy, the sustainability option should always be the least expensive. What then happened was that Russia decided that this is a great conversation to kind of polarize the Swedes. So they started their disinformation engine. And Aftonbladet and Expressen and a lot of Swedish media started to write about all the upset Swedes about this IKEA sausage price rise. And the funny thing was that the Swedish radio was the only media who went out and talked to anyone at an IKEA warehouse. And the person they interviewed, he said, I think it's fine that the sausage is 2 kronor more expensive. Everything is getting more expensive now. We have inflation. This is not weird at all. I think it makes sense. So the only real human they had talked to was positive to this. Still, and you can see here that the Anon Fluidiot who were writing things on Twitter doesn't really look like a normal human being, right? It looks like a troll. But what IKEA still decided to do was that they removed their decision. So they lowered the price on sausage again based on this Russian disinformation campaign. And I don't have a strong opinion on what the price of sausage should be at IKEA, but I do have a strong opinion about Russia not deciding what our companies, what strategy they run, right? So there's a big issue here. And when we see this disinformation attacks, especially when they hit organizations, you need to kind of do PR and communication and be a little bit strategic about how to mitigate this. But there's a lot you can do if something happens. Another thing we monitor is weather. And it's very different, but you can see we have, like with climate change, extreme weather is increasing. So there are more wildfires, droughts, heat waves, and floods. For example, they're very concrete. They are global challenges, and they also challenge a lot of companies in different ways. So if we look at forest fires as an example, 9 out of 10 forest fires are caused by humans. A lot of them are caused by forestry. And it's the same in Canada, and in Sweden, and in Australia. This is a global problem. And I think what's interesting is that around like 350, 450 kind of ignitions from forest machines every year, 33% of that, a third, they all happen on days when, this is technical, the fire weather index that SMHI calculates every day, when it's more than 20. So when it's more than 20, a third of all these forest issues happen. But it's only more than 4 to 5 days a year. So more than 100 of these ignitions, they start in 4 to 5 days a year. And this is also geographically changing, right? So it's not over 20 in the whole country at once. So if we know this, and we can use the open data from SMHI to calculate where it's more risky, and the risk of a forest fire is higher, if you're Stora Enso or Holmen or someone who works in forestry, you have a lot better data to look at maybe we should not go out with our machines today, or maybe we should have a fire car in close proximity to our machines so that we can continue to do our work, but we reduce the risk of a fire. So there are multiple ways you can do this if you have the data. And another thing that is related to weather is that just the fact that it's getting hotter is also a big challenge for many companies, especially like if you're a factory and you have workers, and the heat in itself is a risk. So in 2050, the productivity loss from heat will be around 1% of GDP. That's a huge loss. And by knowing this, and by using the heat data to calculate like how, to kind of predict what's coming up, you can change your shifts around. Maybe you move personnel and workers from one factory to another factory if you're at risk of having things standing still due to heat. Like, you can plan a lot differently if you monitor this, and by using that data, you can change how you operate. So there's a lot you can do. And I think the cost of this, like the cost of climate change, is going to be huge. And especially like when we talk about the cost of climate change is going to be huge, yes, it's for society at large, but it's also for individual companies. So the cost in growth and GDP is pretty substantial. For China, they are at risk of losing 24% of their GDP in a severe scenario. So China is one of the world's largest economies. So that's a huge issue for society at large. The US stands to lose close to 10, and Europe almost 11. So these are going to be huge, very impactful for us as a society, and for many businesses. So in addition to everything we do to kind of prevent climate change, we also need to figure out how can we use the data we have about weather and climate to make sure that we operate our businesses smarter and like give ourselves a better opportunity to do this. Okay, so I'm just going to finish off a little bit with how we use the data when we try to build resilience for companies. So one of the big things is that we cannot only look at one data point at a time, or one data source at a time. because risks marry each other. So you might have geopolitical tension, you have a conflict in Russia or between Russia and Ukraine. All of a sudden, you don't have enough resources. Like we have energy prices, cost of living crisis due to this geopolitical conflict. So like things kind of ripple throughout and they combine each other. So if we only look at one data source at a time, we don't get the full picture. So we always analyze all sources at once, and things are strangely connected, or they're connected in strange ways. So we see that companies who are more progressive when it comes to climate are more at larger risk for disinformation attacks. So we monitor everything. If you do a big kind of statement on your climate strategy publicly, your risk of disinformation attacks will increase. So things are connected in weird ways. We use AI to monitor and predict, because we can tailor the analysis to each company. We can be a lot quicker, we can process larger volumes of data, and we can estimate the impact directly on each company, so that we can tell you as a company when you need to care and when it's just noise. And we can also suggest what to do, because you want to have it very closely connected to that something has happened, you want to start to act. And with AI and the possibilities with analyzing data using AI, we can shorten that time span a lot. So I'm just quickly going to show you, because I think it's interesting how we do this with AI. So we monitor a lot of different sources of data, weather, news, social media, financial data. And we have an AI model with a unique profile for each company that we use when we do this monitoring. So the AI brain is tailored as any employee focused on this specific set of company issues. And that AI profile analyzes the source, and a different AI profile that is also tailored to the specific company that we look at writes a written update or provides a written analysis. And together with human analysts that kind of help them, they're in the loop. And then the human kind of distributes this and answers questions about the data and the kind of risk assessments that has been done. And we can answer those 3 questions. What's going on? What's the impact on your business? And what should you do now? We use currently OpenAI and Perplexity, which are 2 different AI models when we do this, but it's only early, so I think that will change a lot. But artificial intelligence is a pretty cool way to kind of monitor all these niche sources and yeah, get some understanding of what's going on. So that was my final slide. Thank you.
Should we move over there a little bit?
Sorry.
Thank you. We have some questions for you as well. First question being, since this is the Cyber and Privacy Day, what's your opinion based on the data that you've collected and the organizations that you've been looking at and helping to do this? Are there any trends when it comes to who is specifically vulnerable for cyber attacks, ransomware attacks, different sectors, different times of year, or when doing, like you said, different statements publicly? Are there any takeaways in that regard?
Yes. So I think whenever you speak out in a sensitive issue, the risk of cyber threats are going to increase, and since we monitor this, we see this quite direct impact. So we often recommend companies when they should communicate and not, because of the narratives that surround them. So when the US were pulling back the abortion laws, or when they made changes to their abortion availability, a lot of companies went out and said, we're going to support our staff who live in a state where abortion is illegal, and we're going to help them get an out-of-state abortion. A lot of companies did this from like an employer benefit, HR kind of perspective, and their cyber threats and disinformation levels rose a lot, quite directly as an impact of that decision. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of, I think maybe they should have done that, but maybe they shouldn't do a PR stunt of doing that, because that's the risk of cyber. So I think, yes, everything is very much connected, and I think that's kind of why it's important for an audience like this to understand that yes, you need to care, unfortunately.
Did we have another question?
Yes, 2 questions in Slido. For a specific company, do you look at any internal data from that specific company as well for your analysis? And in that case, what type of data would it be?
We can, but for privacy reasons, we have started with the external, well, like we're simplifying it for ourselves a little bit and look at external sources. But I think there is a lot of interesting internal data. So a lot of the time, you want to tie actions to your internal, who should take an action, right? If we want to act quickly and shorten that, I think that's interesting to like look at who do we can we delegate already in the process. But I also think there are things like financial, like where do you invest? Where are you gonna, like, I've been on the marketing side quite a lot. A lot of the time you need to pull a marketing campaign because something happens in the world. Like, where do you invest? How should you spend your media budgets? If you see that, and like now Russia is gonna misbehave and there's gonna be sanctions, there are a lot of things you can do if you know how your kind of plan, like how is your exposure to that? There's a lot of internal data, financial data that you can use to kind of predict that even closer. So yes, I think in one way you want to use as much data as possible, but we have also decided that we want to save ourselves some headaches on the privacy side and kind of go with the external data for now.
Yeah, we just got another question here. Let's jump into that. Is it possible that confirmation bias plays a role in customer boycotts, so that you mistake genuine customer complaints for foreign influence?
I think that's something you always need to have in mind, right? To kind of do that assessment. But a lot of the time when they are very different in nature. So when you're on the when you're on the side where you get the boycott, it's pretty obvious when it's one or when it's another. But you always go in and kind of look at it. But there's a lot of ways to predict if something is a bot or if it's real human, and so a lot of the time we know quite well when it's one and when it's another. But it's still like even if it's a disinformation campaign, most leaders still feel like it's very uncomfortable, and it's as kind of like IKEA. I think it's very rare that you do not act on it because it's such an uncomfortable thing to have. And because the volumes of a disinformation campaigns are huge, like it's thousands and thousands of comments. So you almost react as if it's real still.
We take the last one here as well. You mentioned NATO and the water crisis on the trends that you are looking at. Maybe a bit negative. Are you following any positive trends narratives that you can say something about?
No, well,
no.
But I do think though that, like, for me, the data is not negative or positive. In like the nature of the data is neutral. I think so. What we do is that we want to, with NATO, there's a lot of things you can do that are helping, that are strategic. You can use a strategic advantage or get a strategic advantage by using it. Like if you have a drought, you might want to be quick and source your cotton from somewhere else, and then it is a positive kind of information. The knowledge is still positive, even if, yes, I'm in the rabbit hole and I look at a lot of the dark things in the world, but I think it's still like positive to know, if you know what I mean.
Great. The
Yeah.
data is neutral. That's the ending point here, I think. We give Anna a big applause.
Thank you.